Imagine being fired by your racist boss after he steals your groundbreaking work meant to help marginalized communities. Called a nobody, Simone Harper, a brilliant black woman in tech, feels the sting of injustice and corporate indifference. But her boss made a fatal mistake, underestimating her. Witness the electrifying moment she reveals her true identity live online. She's the CEO's estranged daughter. Feel the shockwaves as she demands accountability and exposes the rot, leaving the man who tried to erase her utterly jobless. You won't believe how she rewrites the code of power. The air in the corridor outside the evergreen tech boardroom hummed with the low thrum of central air and the high frequency of Simone Harper's anxiety. She paced, the plush gray carpet silencing her footsteps but not the frantic beat against her ribs. 30 years old, a senior project manager and the architect of the presentation currently loaded onto the conference room display, a presentation that could redefine Evergreen's approach to corporate responsibility. Her burgundy blazer, usually a shield of professional confidence, felt tight across her shoulders. She smoothed it down, adjusted the cuff of her cream silk blouse, and took a deep, centering breath that tasted vaguely of recycled oxygen and floor wax. Her project, codenamed Project Canopy, was more than just code and projections. It was an AI-driven sustainability initiative designed to identify and mitigate environmental hazards, specifically targeting the disproportionate carbon footprints plaguing Boston's marginalized neighborhoods like Roxbury, where she'd spent weekends visiting her grandmother, neighborhoods often sacrificed at the altar of urban development. It was data science meeting social justice, elegant in its logic, radical in its implications. It was her work, born from late nights fueled by lukewarm coffee and a simmering indignation at the systemic inequalities mirrored even in environmental policy. The polished oak door of the boardroom stood closed, a silent gatekeeper to the inner sanctum where decisions were made, careers forged or fractured. Her team, Rahul Patel, the meticulous Indian data engineer whose algorithms formed the project's backbone, Maria Gonzalez, the fiercely talented Puerto Rican designer whose visualizations made the data sing, and Leah Dubois, her sharp, observant Haitian intern, fluent in 3 languages and possessing an uncanny ability to find the signal in the noise, were already inside, setting up. Simone was meant to join them, take her place at the head of the virtual table, and pitch the future. But then he appeared, materializing from his corner office like a plume of expensive cologne and entitlement. Derek Langley, 48, white, vice president of strategic initiatives and Simone's direct supervisor. His silver hair was perfectly coiffed, his navy suit impeccably tailored, his smile practiced and wide, yet it never quite reached his pale blue eyes. Derek was infamous for his emphasis on culture fit, a nebulous metric that Simone had observed over her 3 years at Evergreen, consistently favored candidates who looked, sounded, and thought exactly like him. Simone, he said, his voice smooth as polished granite. He held out his hand, not for a handshake, but for the leather-bound folder containing her presentation notes. Big day. Simone clutched the folder tighter. It is, Derek. We're ready. The data is solid, the projections are compelling. I know. He glanced towards the boardroom door, then back at her, his smile tightening fractionally. Look, Simone, I've been thinking. These clients, they're old guard, accustomed to a certain familiarity, a certain way of doing things. It might be better if I walk them through this. The air left Simone's lungs in a silent rush. Familiarity. He meant white. He meant male. He meant not her. Derek, she began, keeping her voice level, professional, despite the tremor starting in her hands. This is my project, my team. I know this material inside and out. I'm prepared to address any technical questions, and you've done a stellar job pulling it together. He interrupted, his hands still outstretched, insistent. Truly. But the pitch? It's about confidence, rapport, making them comfortable. Let me handle the front end. You can jump in for the Q&A if needed. He finally snatched the folder from her grasp before she could react further, his fingers brushing hers with a dismissive coolness. Wouldn't want any misunderstandings to derail this. It's too important. He didn't wait for her response. He strode towards the boardroom, pushed open the door, and vanished inside, leaving Simone standing in the corridor, the imprint of his condescension burning on her skin. She felt a cold dread creep up her spine, the familiar chill of being underestimated, sidelined, erased. Taking another shaky breath, she followed him in, forcing a professional mask onto her face. The room was dominated by a long, gleaming mahogany table. Screens glowed with Maria's elegant infographics. Rahul was making a final adjustment to the audio connection. Leah sat near the back, tablet in hand, her expression carefully neutral. The clients, 3 older white men in conservative suits representing a major potential investor, were already seated, sipping mineral water. Derek stood at the head of the table, her folder open before him. He launched into the presentation, his voice resonating with practiced authority. He spoke of innovation, of sustainability, of Evergreen's commitment to the future. He used Simone's meticulously crafted slides, her carefully phrased arguments, her team's hard-won data. He presented Project Canopy as if it had sprung fully formed from his own strategic mind. He never mentioned her name. Not once. Simone sat rigidly, her hands clenched in her lap. Her mind raced, replaying his words, familiarity, rapport, confidence, euphemisms stacked like bricks in a wall meant to keep her out. She felt Rahul's sympathetic glance, saw the slight frown crease Maria's brow. Then her phone buzzed silently on the table. A message from Leah, he's lying. Took credit for everything. Said it was his concept. Anger, hot and sharp, pierced through the numb shock. Leah, the youngest in the room, the intern, the immigrant woman navigating a treacherous corporate landscape, saw it clearly. She wasn't afraid to name it. When the presentation concluded to polite applause and murmurs of interest, Derek basked in the glow, smoothly fielding initial questions. Simone waited, forcing herself to stay calm, professional. Later, after the clients had departed, promising follow-up, Simone found Derek preening by the coffee machine near his office. "Derek," she said, her voice tight but controlled. "We need to talk about the presentation." He turned, stirring his coffee, that infuriatingly smug smile back in place. "Ah, Simone. Went well, didn't it?" They seemed impressed. "They seemed impressed with my work, which you presented as your own." His smile didn't falter, but his eyes went cold, glacial. "I positioned the project for success. Sometimes that requires strategic leadership." Strategic leadership? Or blatant plagiarism and sexism? "You undermined me, Derek. You stole my team's work." He took a slow sip of his coffee, looking down at her. The height difference, usually insignificant, felt suddenly vast. "You're getting emotional, Simone. It's not a good look. You need to understand how things work here. Know your place. Know your place." The phrase hung in the air, thick and poisonous. It echoed generations of dismissal, centuries of subjugation packed into 3 condescending words. She wanted to scream, to throw her coffee at his pristine suit, to unleash the torrent of frustration that had been building for years. Instead, she held his gaze, her own eyes narrowed. "My place," she said softly, dangerously, "is leading projects I developed. My place is getting credit for my work. My place is not letting men like you erase me." He chuckled, a dry, dismissive sound. "You're ambitious, I'll give you that. But ambition needs to be tempered with realism. Don't make waves." He turned and walked back into his office, closing the door firmly behind him. Simone stood there, trembling, the adrenaline fading, leaving behind a hollow ache. She returned to her desk, the open-plan office suddenly feeling exposed, hostile. She tried to focus on her emails, but Derek's words reverberated in her head. That night, working late to salvage what she could of the client follow-up Derek had already botched with his lack of technical depth. She found it. Drawn in thick black marker on her desk calendar, hanging obscenely over the date, a crude, unmistakable drawing of a noose. Ice flooded her veins. This wasn't just dismissal anymore. This was a threat. Her hands shook as she took a picture with her phone. Her first instinct was HR. Morin Carter, the director of human resources, had a LinkedIn profile peppered with phrases like diversity champion and building inclusive workplaces. She'd led mandatory unconscious bias trainings that felt more like corporate box ticking than genuine commitment. Simone scheduled an urgent meeting. Sitting in Maureen's sterile office the next morning, Simone presented the photo, explained the confrontation with Derek, the theft of her work. Morin, a blonde woman in her late 50s with meticulously applied makeup and a strained smile, listened patiently. She steepled her fingers, examined the photo on Simone's phone, and sighed. "Simone," she said, her tone radiating practiced empathy that felt utterly false. "I understand you're upset. Derek can be direct. But a noose? Are you sure? It looks like, well, it could be a poorly drawn knot. Perhaps someone was doodling." "Doodling? A noose? On my calendar after I confronted my boss about stealing my work." Simone's voice rose despite her efforts to control it. "Lower your voice, dear," Morin said soothingly, which only inflamed Simone more. "We don't want to escalate things unnecessarily. It was probably just a thoughtless prank. Someone being foolish. You know how office humor can be." "This isn't humor, Morin. This is a symbol of racial terror. It's a threat. Morin leaned back, her expression shifting to one of mild exasperation. Simone, let's be realistic. Accusing a VP of something like this, it's serious. Very serious. It could damage his reputation. It could damage the company's reputation. And frankly, she lowered her voice conspiratorially, making these kinds of accusations can be career-limiting. Are you sure you want to stir up this kind of drama? Perhaps it's best to just let it go. Focus on your work. Prove your value through results. Simone stared at her, dumbfounded. The diversity champion was telling her to ignore a racist threat to protect the company and the perpetrator. The complicity was suffocating. So, you're not going to investigate? There's nothing concrete to investigate, dear, Morin said, already reaching for a file on her desk, signaling the meeting was over. Just an ambiguous drawing. Let's not make mountains out of molehills. Simone walked out of HR feeling colder than she had in the corridor the day before. The system wasn't just failing her, it was actively protecting the source of the rot. The axe fell 3 days later. It came via a curt email from Morin, CCNG Derek, summoning her to HR. The subject line, organizational restructuring. Derek wasn't present. Morin delivered the news with the same detached professionalism she'd deployed earlier. Due to unforeseen budget cuts and strategic realignment, your position as senior project manager has been eliminated, effective immediately. Budget cuts? Simone echoed, incredulous. Project Canopy just got preliminary interest from a major investor. We're talking millions. Decisions have been made at a higher level, Morin said, avoiding eye contact, sliding a severance agreement across the desk. Standard procedure. Security will escort you out. It happened so fast. One moment she was a rising star at a major tech firm. The next she was packing her meager desk belongings into a cardboard box under the watchful eye of a stony-faced security guard. Her team watched, stunned into silence. Rahul looked horrified. Maria's eyes welled with tears. As she walked past the bank of elevators, Tyrone Wright, the quiet, dignified black janitor who always had a friendly nod for her, met her gaze. His expression was one of weary understanding. Simone knew his story. An ex-con, smart and capable, repeatedly denied promotions for roles he was more than qualified for, relegated to cleaning up other people's messes. He knew injustice when he saw it. Just as Simone reached the main exit, Leah Dubois slipped out from behind a pillar, pressing something small and hard into Simone's hand. It was a USB flash drive. Derek's been sloppy, Leah whispered urgently, her eyes darting around. He thinks I'm just the intern who fetches coffee. He routed funds, company money, to his personal accounts, disguised as vendor payments. To his golf club, mostly. It's all here. Emails, invoices, bank transfers. Be careful, Simone. He's protected. Simone closed her fist around the drive, the cool metal a small, hard point of defiance in the wreckage of her career. She nodded at Leah, a silent promise passing between them. Then, flanked by security, she walked out of the gleaming glass doors of Evergreen Tech, jobless, furious, but not entirely powerless. The glass ceiling hadn't just cracked, it had shattered, raining shards down on her. But she held a piece of evidence that might just bring the whole rotten structure down. The salt-laced wind whipped through Simone's braids as she sat perched on the wide porch railing of the sprawling vacation house. Below, the manicured lawn rolled down towards the Inkwell beach, its sands historically a haven for black families seeking refuge and respite. But inside the house, a storm was brewing. 14-year-old Simone strained to hear the argument drifting from the living room, the familiar cadence of her parents' disagreements escalating into something sharper, more final. Her mother, Dr. Alicia Harper, stood tall and regal, her dark skin glowing against her white linen dress. An epidemiologist with a fierce intellect and an even fiercer commitment to justice, she gestured emphatically, her voice tight with controlled fury. James, you cannot ignore this. The data is clear. The women at Evergreen, particularly the black women, are being paid significantly less than their white male counterparts for the same work. It's systemic. It's blatant. You have the power to fix it. Her father, James Evergreen, leaned against the grand fireplace, a tumbler of amber liquid swirling in his hand. He was a man of contradictions, the visionary tech mogul who'd built an empire from scratch, yet whose own identity felt like a carefully constructed edifice. Biracial, with a black mother and a white father, James possessed features that allowed him, often by omission rather than outright declaration, to move through the world, particularly the predominantly white world of tech and finance, as white. His success was undeniable, his ambition boundless. Alicia, be reasonable. he countered, his voice smoother, more placating, but underscored with steel. We're weeks away from the IPO. Bringing this up now? Publicly acknowledging pay gaps? It will spook investors. Could tank the whole damn thing. We address it quietly, internally, after we go public. After? Alicia's laugh was brittle. After you've secured your fortune on the backs of underpaid women? After the system is even more entrenched? No, James. This isn't about timing, it's about principle. It's about the values you claim Evergreen stands for. Evergreen stands for innovation. For progress. Don't saddle my company with your activist agenda right now. My activist agenda? Alicia repeated, her voice trembling with hurt and disbelief. James, this is about basic fairness. It's about the women who look like your daughter, who look like your mother. How can you build this empire and ignore the foundations are cracked? I built this empire by being pragmatic, James retorted, his face hardening. Something you seem to have forgotten. This is business, Alicia, not a social experiment. Simone heard the finality in his tone, saw the way her mother recoiled as if struck. The air grew thick with unspoken resentments, with the chasm that had been widening between them for years, the chasm between Alicia's unwavering commitment to her identity and community and James's strategic assimilation into the corridors of white power. Later that night, Alicia packed her bags and Simone's. There were tears, hushed explanations Simone didn't fully grasp, promises of phone calls. They left the vineyard, left the imposing house that felt more like a museum than a home, and returned to Alicia's cramped but loving apartment in Cambridge. They never went back. The bridge between Simone's parents and between Simone and her father crumbled that summer, leaving behind a wreckage of unspoken questions and unresolved pain. Alicia, brilliant and uncompromising, focused on her public health work, fighting for equity in communities often overlooked, until cancer claimed her 5 years later, leaving Simone orphaned in spirit long before her time. James Evergreen, the tech titan, soared ever higher, his public persona scrubbed clean of inconvenient complexities, his daughter a footnote he rarely acknowledged. The scent of sofrito and simmering beans filled the small, vibrant Harlem apartment. Maria Gonzalez, ever the nurturer, had insisted Simone stay with her after the eviction notice arrived, a swift and brutal consequence of her sudden unemployment. Simone's savings, carefully accumulated but depleted by student loans and the high cost of Boston living, wouldn't stretch far. Mija, you eat, Maria insisted, placing a steaming plate of rice and beans in front of Simone. Maria, a single mother juggling her demanding design job at Evergreen with raising her energetic son, Matteo, understood precarity all too well. She battled her own wage gap demons, constantly fighting for fair compensation while producing work that consistently outperformed her peers. You need your strength. Simone managed a weak smile, picking at the food. She'd spent the last week oscillating between rage and despair. The USB drive Leah had given her sat heavy in her borrowed laptop bag. She'd examined its contents, damning evidence of Derek Langley's embezzlement. Emails authorizing payments to shell companies that traced back to his exclusive golf club, invoices padded and approved, wire transfer confirmations. It was enough to ruin him professionally, maybe even legally. But Leah's warning echoed, he's connected. He's protected. Derek wasn't just a rogue VP, he was part of a system. Maureen Carter's dismissal proved that. Going to the authorities felt risky, potentially exposing Leah, who was on a student visa and vulnerable. Going to the press? Without more clout, she might be dismissed as a disgruntled employee. What are you going to do, Sim? Maria asked gently, sitting across from her at the small kitchen table, Matteo's colorful drawings taped to the wall behind her. I don't know, Simone admitted, rubbing her temples. Derek needs to pay for what he did. Not just to me, but systematically. The racism, the sexism, the theft. It's all intertwined. And HR covered it up. The whole damn culture is rotten. She thought of Tyrone scrubbing floors while less qualified men got promoted. She thought of Rahul, brilliant but consistently overlooked for leadership roles. She thought of Maria, fighting for every dollar. It's bigger than Derek, Maria agreed softly. He's just a symptom. Simone nodded, staring into her plate. A desperate idea, one she'd pushed down for years, began to surface. An idea born of fury and a strange, unwelcome flicker of inheritance. There was one person with the power to shake Evergreen to its core, one person who owed her more than he could ever repay. She hadn't spoken to James Evergreen in 12 years, not since a brief, awkward phone call after her mother's funeral, where he'd offered condolences that felt hollow and distant. He sent checks occasionally, routed through lawyers, which Simone had resentfully deposited, needing the money but hating the transaction, the reminder of his detached presence in her life. Now, evicted, blacklisted, she suspected Derek was already poisoning the well with potential employers. She was out of options. She pulled out her phone, her fingers trembling as she scrolled through contacts she hadn't accessed in years. His private number, a relic from a past life. Taking a deep breath, she pressed call. It rang once, twice, 3 times. She was about to hang up when a voice answered, deeper than she remembered, but still carrying the familiar blend of authority and guardedness. James Evergreen. Silence stretched for a beat. Dad? The word felt foreign on her tongue. It's Simone. Another silence, longer this time. She could picture him in his penthouse office, probably overlooking the Boston skyline, surprised, perhaps annoyed, by this ghost from his past. Simone, he finally said, his voice carefully neutral. This is unexpected. Is everything all right? No, she said bluntly, the dam of resentment starting to crack. No, everything is not all right. I was fired. From Evergreen. Your company. She heard him shift, a rustle of expensive fabric. Fired? On what grounds? Manufactured grounds. Budget cuts. The real reason is that my boss, Derek Langley, stole credit for my project and I called him out on it. Then someone drew a noose on my desk calendar and HR told me not to stir drama. The words tumbled out sharp and angry, a heavy sigh on the other end. Derek Langley, yes, I know Derek. Ambitious. He paused. A noose? Simone, that's unacceptable. I'll look into it immediately. Looking into it isn't enough. Simone shot back, the desperation hardening into resolve. I need a job, Dad. I just got evicted. Guilt, thick and palpable, radiated through the phone line. Of course. Yes. We can find something for you. A junior analyst role, perhaps? Something to tide you over while we sort this out. I'll make some calls, No. Simone cut him off, the audacity of her next words surprising even herself. The idea, seated in desperation, now bloomed into defiant purpose. This wasn't just about getting a job, it was about reclaiming something, about confronting the legacy that had shaped and scarred her. I don't want a junior role. I don't want you to find something for me. Then what do you want, Simone? James asked, a note of wary impatience creeping into his voice. Simone took a breath, channeling her mother's strength, her own fury, the weight of years of silence. I want your job, she said, the words clear and steady. I want to run Evergreen. The right way. The silence on the other end was absolute, stretching into an abyss. Simone held her breath, the demand hanging between them, a bridge either newly forged or irrevocably burned. The air in Evergreen's Silicon Valley campus felt different from Boston, thinner, drier, scented with eucalyptus and the faint, metallic tang of relentless innovation. Glass walls, minimalist furniture, and strategically placed succulent gardens projected an image of transparency and eco-consciousness that felt, to Simone, increasingly hollow. James, caught between the potential PR nightmare of his estranged daughter's accusations and the sudden pressure from key shareholders now whispering about Evergreen's lagging diversity metrics, had flown her out here. Not with an offer for the CEO chair that he'd brushed off as grief-stricken hyperbole, but with a vague promise to assess the situation and an invitation to observe the company's newly formed AI Ethics Committee meeting. See for yourself, Simone, he'd said, his tone attempting reconciliation but laced with defensiveness. We are taking these issues seriously. We're committed to responsible technology. The committee convened in a stark white conference room that felt less like a space for ethical deliberation and more like an interrogation chamber. Around the polished table sat 5 men, all white, mostly middle-aged, clad in the unofficial uniform of Silicon Valley elite. Expensive casual wear that screamed status more effectively than any suit. James took his place at the head of the table, nodding curtly at Simone, who sat slightly apart, an observer, an outsider. The agenda item was the approval of a new AI-powered hiring tool, codenamed Talentflow. Dr. Ethan Cole, the lead data scientist behind the project, young, sharp-featured, with an air of supreme confidence bordering on arrogance, presented the tool with slick graphics and technical jargon. Talentflow analyzes candidate applications, resumes, and even preliminary video interviews, Cole explained, gesturing towards a screen displaying complex flowcharts. It uses natural language processing and sentiment analysis to identify keywords, assess communication skills, and predict culture fit with unparalleled efficiency and objectivity. Objectivity. The word landed like a stone in Simone's gut. Cole continued, "Our algorithms filter for key performance indicators, educational backgrounds from top-tier institutions, and professional articulation. It streamlines the initial screening process, freeing up HR to focus on the most promising candidates." Simone listened, a cold dread spreading through her. She thought of the vibrant, code-switching brilliance of communities like the one she grew up in, the resilience forged in adversity that didn't always translate into professional articulation as defined by elite, homogeneous standards. "Dr. Cole," Simone interjected, unable to stay silent. James shot her a warning glance, but she ignored it. What datasets was TalentFlow trained on? And how does it account for linguistic diversity? For instance, African American vernacular English or speech patterns common in immigrant communities. Cole smirked, adjusting his wire-rimmed glasses. The algorithm is trained on a vast corpus of successful employee profiles and industry benchmarks. It identifies patterns correlated with high performance within Evergreen. So, it's trained primarily on your existing workforce? Which, forgive me for pointing out, is overwhelmingly white and male, especially in leadership. Simone pressed. Doesn't that risk replicating existing biases? Filtering out candidates from underrepresented backgrounds whose dialects or phrasing might be flagged as unprofessional or poor culture fit by a biased algorithm. One of the committee members, an older man with a florid face, cleared his throat. "Ms. Harper, is it? We appreciate your perspective, but the goal here is efficiency and identifying top talent. We can't lower the bar or compromise standards just to meet diversity quotas. Lower the bar." The coded language was suffocatingly familiar. As if diversity was antithetical to excellence. Ethan Cole added smoothly, "The algorithm is designed to be neutral. It simply processes data. We've included safeguards against explicit demographic bias." "But bias isn't always explicit, Dr. Cole," Simone countered, her voice rising slightly. "It's embedded in the data itself. If your successful employee profiles are predominantly white men from Ivy League schools, your algorithm will learn to favor candidates who match that profile. It will learn to flag urban dialects or zip codes associated with minority neighborhoods as negative indicators. This isn't objective, it's automated discrimination. It erases black candidates, Latinx candidates, anyone who doesn't fit the pre-existing mold." The room went quiet. The committee members shifted uncomfortably. James stared straight ahead, his jaw tight. Ethan Cole's smirk had vanished, replaced by a flicker of irritation. "With all due respect," Cole said coolly, "you're speculating. The technology is sound." The committee, after a brief, perfunctory discussion that studiously avoided Simone's points, voted unanimously to approve TalentFlow for beta testing. Business as usual. Later that evening, sequestered in the sterile corporate apartment James had arranged for her, Simone couldn't shake the unease. Something about Ethan Cole's defensiveness, his insistence on the algorithm's neutrality, felt off. She still had the USB drive Leah had given her. While its primary contents detailed Derek Langley's embezzlement, Leah, ever meticulous, had included other folders, project backups, internal memos, datasets Derek had access to as VP. Fueled by suspicion and coffee, Simone dove into the drive's less obvious corners. She cross-referenced project codes, searched internal Evergreen servers using temporary credentials James had reluctantly granted her, and pulled up the development logs for TalentFlow. And then she found it. Buried in the metadata, masked under layers of technical camouflage, the core datasets used to train Ethan Cole's objective algorithm. They weren't just based on general employee profiles, a significant portion came directly from hiring pools and performance reviews overseen by none other than Derek Langley. Derek, the man who favored culture fit, who told her to know her place, whose definition of top talent was intrinsically tied to his own reflection. His biased human decisions, his subjective assessments riddled with racial and gender prejudice, had formed the bedrock of TalentFlow's neutral intelligence. Ethan Cole hadn't just built an algorithm, he digitized Derek Langley's bigotry and scaled it company-wide. He must have known. Or, perhaps worse, he hadn't bothered to look too closely, blinded by his own faith in the infallibility of data. Simone felt sick. This wasn't just about one racist boss. It was about the entire ecosystem that allowed his biases to be codified, automated, and laundered through the language of objective technology. She stormed over to James's penthouse suite, bypassing the concierge with a flash of the keycard he'd given her. He was on a video call, pacing his opulent living room, the city lights glittering behind him like scattered diamonds. "We need to talk," Simone said. her voice shaking with anger as she slammed the door shut. James ended his call abruptly, turning to face her, his expression wary. "Simone, what is it now?" "Talentflow," she spat. "Your objective AI hiring tool. It's built on lies. It was trained on datasets curated by Derek Langley. It's programmed to replicate his biases. Your neutral tech is racist, Dad. Systemically, deliberately racist." She laid out her findings, the data trails, the connection between Derek's prejudiced management and the algorithm's core logic. James listened, his face paling slightly, but his defenses were already up. "Simone, that's a serious accusation. Ethan Cole is one of our brightest minds. Langley's data might have been part of the input, but the algorithms are complex. Stop defending it." Simone yelled, years of frustration boiling over. "Stop making excuses. You brought me here to assess the situation? Fine. Here's my assessment. Your company is actively building tools to perpetuate racial inequality, and you're either complicit or willfully blind because it's easier than confronting the truth. Is this the legacy you want? Building a future where people like me, people like Mom, are systematically excluded by lines of code you commissioned." He flinched at the mention of her mother. "That's unfair, Simone. It's just business. We have to stay competitive. These tools improve efficiency." "Efficiency?" she repeated incredulously. "Efficiency at replicating prejudice? Is that what Evergreen stands for now?" The chasm between them felt wider than ever, filled not just with personal history but with a fundamental disagreement about the soul of the company he'd built. He turned away, looking out at the glittering, indifferent city. "I will speak to Cole. We'll review the parameters." "Reviewing parameters isn't enough," Simone said, her voice hardening. She saw it clearly now. Working from the inside, playing by their rules, wouldn't work. The system was designed to protect itself. It was time to break the rules. She walked over to his desk where his laptop lay open. Before he could react, she plugged in the USB drive. With quick, decisive clicks, she navigated to Evergreen's internal company-wide Slack channel. She uploaded the files detailing Derek Langley's embezzlement, the emails, the invoices, the transfers. Then she typed a short, explosive message. Subject: the real cost of doing business at Evergreen. Body: VP Derek Langley hasn't just been stealing credit, he's been stealing company funds. See attached evidence. Ask yourselves, is this the culture fit Evergreen values? Is this the leadership driving our future? #EvergreenEthics, #FireDerek. She hit send. Almost immediately, the digital space erupted. Notifications pinged rapidly. Channels lit up with shocked emojis, angry comments, demands for answers. Within minutes, the #FireDerek was trending across Evergreen's internal network. Employees, emboldened by the anonymity of the platform and the concrete proof of corruption, began sharing their own stories of Derek's toxic management, of microaggressions, of stolen ideas, of HR's inaction. The algorithm of oppression had met the algorithm of collective outrage. James stared at the screen, then at Simone, his face a mask of shock and fury. "What have you done?" "I exposed the rot," Simone said, pulling the USB drive out, her heart pounding but her resolve firm. "You wouldn't listen. Maybe now Evergreen will." The digital wildfire Simone had ignited on Slack quickly leaped the corporate firewall. News of Derek Langley's embezzlement and the burgeoning internal revolt at Evergreen hit tech blogs, then mainstream news outlets. The carefully curated image of Evergreen tech, innovative, ethical, forward-thinking, began to crumble. Outside the Boston headquarters, a small but vocal group of current and former employees gathered, holding signs that read Evergreen, Clean House, Tech Isn't Neutral, and #FireDirect Now. Maria and Rahul were there, their faces determined. Tyrone Wright stood slightly apart, observing, his presence a quiet testament to the long-simmering discontent. Derek Langley, cornered and exposed, reacted with predictable venom. He called Simone, his voice tight with panic and rage. "You little bitch," he hissed through the phone. "You think you can destroy me? I have connections you can't even imagine. You're a nobody," a disgruntled employee throwing a tantrum. "This will blow over, but you? You'll be toxic waste in this industry. Nobody will touch you." Simone listened calmly, the receiver cool against her ear. His threats felt hollow now, the desperate flailing of a man whose power was evaporating. "It's over, Derek," she said evenly. "Your connections can't hide theft. They can't hide bigotry forever. You have no idea who you're dealing with," he blustered. "Actually," Simone replied, a plan forming, audacious and risky. "I think you have no idea who you've been dealing with." She hung up. The media frenzy intensified. Reporters camped outside Evergreen offices in Boston and Silicon Valley. Shareholders grew increasingly agitated, their demands for answers escalating. James Evergreen found himself trapped in a rapidly escalating crisis, his carefully constructed world imploding. He was bombarded with calls, emails, demands for statements. His attempts to control the narrative, to dismiss the embezzlement as an isolated incident and Simone as unreliable, were failing. Simone knew she needed a final, decisive move. Derek saw her as a nobody. The company saw her as disposable. It was time to play the card she had held close for years, the truth of her identity. The ace hidden up her sleeve. She contacted a prominent tech journalist known for her sharp critiques of Silicon Valley culture. Then, she scheduled a LinkedIn Live session, promoting it simply as a conversation about truth and accountability at Evergreen Tech. From Maria's small Harlem apartment, with Maria herself running the makeshift tech setup, Simone went live. She looked directly into the camera, composed but with an undeniable fire in her eyes. She started by recounting her experience, the stolen project, the dismissal, the Noose, HR's complicity, Derek's embezzlement. She spoke clearly, factually, her voice steady. Derek Langley told me to know my place, she said. Morin Carter told me not to stir drama. They, and perhaps others at Evergreen, believed I was insignificant, someone they could silence and discard. They believed I was a nobody. She paused, letting the weight of her words settle. But I am not a nobody. My name is Simone Harper. My mother was Dr. Alicia Harper, an epidemiologist who dedicated her life to fighting for health equity. She took a breath. And my father is James Evergreen, the founder and CEO of this company. She held up a document to the camera. This is a certified copy of my birth certificate. And this, she held up another paper, is a recent DNA test confirming with 99.99% certainty that James Evergreen is my biological father. The impact was immediate. The live viewer count surged. Comments flooded the chat: shock, disbelief, outrage, support. Within minutes, #EvergreenCEODaughter was trending globally on Twitter. The revelation sent shockwaves through the business world and the media. The story transformed from a corporate scandal into a deeply personal drama, exposing the hypocrisy at the heart of Evergreen. James Evergreen, the tech visionary who championed innovation, had abandoned his own daughter, allowed her to be racially harassed and unfairly fired from his own company, and presided over a culture that protected abusers. Cornered, facing immense pressure from his board, plummeting stock prices, and the undeniable proof of his paternity splashed across every major news outlet, James finally acted. A terse internal memo announced Derek Langley's immediate termination for violations of company policy and ethical standards. Another memo followed shortly, announcing the suspension of the Talent Flow project pending a full ethical review and the disbanding of the current AI ethics committee. Ethan Cole was placed on administrative leave. Morin Carter quietly submitted her resignation. It was a victory, but Simone knew it wasn't enough. Firing the most visible culprits was damage control, not systemic change. The rot ran deeper. Days later, Evergreen called a press conference, ostensibly for James Evergreen to address the crisis. Simone, however, had other plans. Working quickly with Leah, Maria, and connecting with Tyrone back in Boston, they organized. As James stepped up to the podium in a packed hotel ballroom, looking strained and older, Simone entered from the side, uninvited. She wasn't alone. Flanked by Leah Dubois, the brilliant intern who'd risked everything, Maria Gonzalez, the resilient designer who represented countless underpaid women of color, and Tyrone Wright, flown in from Boston, his quiet dignity radiating strength. Simone walked purposefully towards the stage. Security moved to intercept them. But the flashbulbs erupted, cameras swiveled, and a hush fell over the room. James froze, caught completely off guard. Simone reached the podium, standing beside her father, not as his daughter seeking reconciliation, but as an agent of change demanding accountability. Mr. Evergreen has addressed the personnel changes, Simone said, her voice amplified by the microphone, clear and strong. But firing individuals does not dismantle the systems that allowed their actions to occur and persist. True accountability requires more. She looked out at the sea of reporters, then turned her gaze to James, whose face was a mixture of shock, anger, and something unreadable, perhaps shame. On behalf of the employees, past and present, who have been harmed by the culture of bias and discrimination at Evergreen Tech, we demand the following. She paused, ensuring she had everyone's attention. 1. A formal, public apology from Evergreen Tech and from James Evergreen personally, not just for the recent events, but for the long-standing systemic inequities faced by employees of color, women, and other marginalized groups within this company. 2. The establishment of a substantial, independently administered reparations and community investment fund. This fund will be dedicated to supporting initiatives in the predominantly Black and brown communities, like Roxbury in Boston, that have been historically redlined and disproportionately affected by the environmental negligence and biased technologies Evergreen has profited from. This includes funding digital literacy programs, supporting local environmental justice organizations, and investing in STEM education in underserved schools. 3. The immediate promotion of Tyrone Wright to Director of Facilities Management for the Boston campus, with back pay commensurate with the responsibilities he has effectively been performing for years without recognition or fair compensation. Furthermore, a transparent review of promotion practices across the company to address systemic barriers. The demands hung in the air, specific, actionable, and radical. They went far beyond corporate platitudes, striking at the heart of corporate responsibility, historical injustice, and economic inequality. James Evergreen looked stunned. He opened his mouth, perhaps to object, perhaps to deflect. But before he could speak, Simone saw a flicker of movement in the front row. A group of Evergreen's largest institutional investors, their faces grim, exchanged glances. One of them, a powerful woman known for her influence on corporate governance, gave a barely perceptible nod. The message was clear: the financial risk of not conceding was now greater than the cost of Simone's demands. Boycotts were being threatened online. Key talent was reportedly updating their resumes. The shareholders, motivated by bottom lines rather than moral clarity, saw the writing on the wall. James saw it too. The fight visibly drained from him. He looked at Simone, at the determined faces of Leah, Maria, and Tyrone beside her, at the expectant press corps, at the watching world. He swallowed hard. Evergreen Tech, he began, his voice strained, accepts these terms. A collective gasp went through the room. Simone didn't smile. She simply nodded, a silent acknowledgement. This wasn't just about unmasking a racist boss or revealing a hidden identity. It was about leveraging that moment, that power, to force a reckoning and demand a fundamental shift towards justice. The unmasking was complete, not just of Derek Langley or James Evergreen, but of the ugly truths hidden beneath the polished veneer of corporate America. The building, once a dilapidated warehouse on a forgotten corner of Roxbury, now pulsed with life. Sunlight streamed through large, newly installed windows, illuminating colorful murals painted by local artists. The air buzzed with conversation, the click of keyboards, and the aroma of strong coffee from a small cafe run by a neighborhood cooperative. This was the Evergreen Community Hub, the flagship initiative born from the reparations and community investment fund Simone had demanded. It wasn't just a building, it was an ecosystem. A state-of-the-art computer lab offered free coding boot camps run in partnership with nearby historically Black colleges and universities, HBCUs, specifically designed to train the next generation of Black and brown tech talent. A co-working space provided resources for local entrepreneurs. An environmental justice advocacy group held meetings in the conference rooms using Evergreen's data resources, now transparently shared, to bolster their campaigns against industrial pollution in the neighborhood. And at the helm of Evergreen Tech, navigating the complex transition from a scandal-ridden corporation to one attempting genuine accountability, was Simone Harper. The board, under immense pressure and seeking a clean break, had eventually, reluctantly, offered her the interim CEO position. After months of pushing through structural reforms, demanding transparency, and centering marginalized voices in decision-making, they had made the position permanent. It was a staggering ascent, fraught with challenges, skepticism, and the constant weight of expectation. Simone walked through the hub, exchanging greetings, checking in on the coding class where bright young faces peered intently at their screens, guided by instructors who looked like them. She paused by the office of the Hub's Director of Operations and Community Engagement. Maria Gonzalez looked up from her designs, a wide smile spreading across her face. Promoted, finally recognized for her talent and vision, Maria was now leading the design team for all of Evergreen's community-facing initiatives, ensuring the aesthetics and user experience centered Afro-Latina perspectives and accessibility for all. Mateo's latest drawing, a vibrant depiction of the hub, held pride of place on her wall. "Looking good, Maria," Simone said, admiring the mock-ups for a new digital literacy app. "Just trying to keep up with the demand, boss," Maria grinned. "The senior coding class wants to collaborate on a real-world project. They have ideas." "Good," Simone nodded. Empowerment isn't just about access, it's about creation. She continued her tour, heading towards the facility's management office. Inside, Tyrone Wright sat at his desk, reviewing blueprints. No longer clad in a janitor's uniform, he wore a crisp button-down shirt, his bearing confident and authoritative. As director of facilities management for the entire Boston campus, including the hub, he oversaw maintenance, operations, and, crucially, a new hiring program he himself had designed. The Second Chance initiative actively recruited and trained formerly incarcerated individuals for skilled positions within Evergreen's facilities and operations teams, providing stable employment, mentorship, and a pathway to rebuilding their lives. It was already showing remarkable success, challenging stereotypes and demonstrating the untapped potential within justice-impacted communities. Simone greeted him. "How's the new cohort settling in?" "Good. Simone." "Real good," Tyrone replied, his voice warm. "Dedicated folks. Just need a chance to prove it." He hesitated for a moment, then slid a standard employment application across the desk. "Funny thing happened this morning. Had a walk-in applicant for one of the custodial positions." Simone glanced at the application. The name leaped out at her, Derek Langley. "He didn't recognize me at first," Tyrone said, a wry twist to his lips. "Looked like he'd been through the ringer. Said he was trying to get back on his feet. Divorced, house foreclosed, couldn't find work anywhere else." Simone looked at Tyrone, seeing the quiet strength, the earned authority. She remembered him mopping floors, his potential ignored, his past used as a barrier. "What did you tell him?" she asked softly. Tyrone met her gaze, his expression calm, professional. "I told him we appreciate his interest, but Evergreen runs thorough background checks on all applicants now. Standard procedure." He picked up the application and dropped it into the recycling bin. No malice, just the quiet hum of accountability. Justice, Simone thought, wasn't always loud. Sometimes it was simply the closing of a door that should have been closed long ago. Later that day, Simone drove out of the city, leaving the gleaming towers of downtown behind. She found herself pulling into the quiet cemetery where her mother was buried. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the manicured grass. Simone knelt by the simple granite headstone, Dr. Alicia Harper. Epidemiologist. Advocate. Mother. She fought for a just world. She pulled a magazine from her bag. It was the latest issue of Forbes. On the cover, a picture of Simone, poised and confident, standing not in a sterile boardroom, but in the vibrant community hub in Roxbury. The headline read, "Simone Harper, the CEO who rewrote the code. How Evergreen Tech is trying to rebuild trust and tackle tech's bias problem." She placed the magazine gently against the headstone. Tears welled in her eyes, not of sadness, but of a profound, aching sense of connection and accomplishment. The fight wasn't over. Dismantling systemic injustice was the work of lifetimes. But they had made a start. They had forced a reckoning. They had planted seeds of change. Her relationship with James remained complicated. He was still chairman of the board, humbled but not entirely transformed. They spoke, navigated the awkward terrain of their shared history and intertwined future. There were moments of understanding, glimpses of the father she barely knew, but the chasm of his past choices remained. Healing, like justice, was a process, not a destination. He had, however, fully funded the reparations initiative, exceeding the initial demand, perhaps seeking a different kind of legacy redemption. Leah Dubois, her student visa secured thanks to Evergreen's sponsorship under Simone's leadership, was now leading a project analyzing algorithmic bias across all of Evergreen's products, her sharp intellect finally given the platform it deserved. Rahul Patel was heading a new data science division focused on ethical AI development. Simone looked at her mother's name etched in stone, the magazine a tangible symbol of the legacy she was trying to build, one that honored Alicia's fierce commitment to justice. "We did it, Mom," she whispered, the breeze carrying her words through the quiet cemetery. "We're doing it. It's just the beginning." She stayed there for a long while, letting the peace of the place settle over her, drawing strength from the memory of her mother's unwavering gaze. Then, she stood up, brushed the grass from her knees, and walked back towards her car, towards the city, towards the ongoing, necessary work of rewriting the code, not just of technology, but of society itself. The new legacy was still being written, one line, one action, one difficult conversation at a time.